Hello again, and thanks for joining us for Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Up on the fire danger map, a more expansive area of both high and extreme fire danger. Pretty extreme here in the Tanana Valley and areas just north of the Alaska Range. Also in the Copper River Basin, some extreme fire danger, narrow area of high fire danger, and then some high fire danger now slipping on down into the Kuskokwim Valley and across the lower Yukon River Valley area here, and then back on out toward the north coast of the Yukon Delta or south coast of Norton Sound. And also up here, Killbuck, and northward there across, say, the western Killbuck Valley into the Selawik Valley and on up into the Brooks Range, with the upper Yukon Valley here staying high to extreme, and even back up to the northeast there. And that's going to continue for the next few days until some more rain, or actually for another day or so. And for the satellite imagery, actually the fire danger in the southwest will begin to diminish as moisture pushes in, as we get several surges coming up, but not much change for the areas off to the east. And again, we've got today a weakening front falling apart here as it pushes inland. Really just a trough was a former front. Not that much with it, just showers though along the western Alaska Range, and some moisture up there to the north. And along the western Arctic coast, clouds, but the eastern coast, the north slope, southwest winds, gusting as high as 30 miles an hour at AKwx, pushed temperatures into the lower to mid-70s there, with Dead Horse reaching 79 degrees this afternoon, with warm conditions, very warm conditions, extending southward across all the eastern interior. Temperatures into the lower to mid-80s in some areas once again, all the way down into the 40-mile country, and 70s Copper River Basin, into the Susitna Valley, down into Anchorage, portion of the Kenai Peninsula. Pretty good day today, and the southeast coast, about the same as you've seen for several days now. Sunshine, warm temperatures, low clouds in along the coast early, tending to burn back except up on the north. And temperatures down south again into the lower to mid-80s, 70s elsewhere, and upper 60s along the coast. Those are mid-afternoon temperatures, 3 p.m. And rolling that through again, you can really not a whole lot here, just high pressure out to the west of you as there has been, and continues to ridge up into the interior. So these systems coming in from the west and southwest really fall apart as they press up and push into that ridge axis as they lose the upper support. And running this through again, you can see another batch of moisture right through here will be advancing along and eastward there, with the main low center sort of hanging back to the west, and then a little bit higher pressure back out toward Shimia, but right on the edge of the map, cloud associated with the next system will be pushing in later tonight. Low pressure here again southwest of the Pearl is about 996 millibars. That brought 3/4 of an inch of rain today with this trough to Adak Island, and some rain on up into the Pribilof Islands. Breezy conditions, well, 25 to 30 miles an hour, and wind gusts there for the Pribilofs, and even stronger winds along the Alaska Peninsula. Even this afternoon, still in that 40 to 45 mile per hour range in the wind gusts, with Cold Bay seeing the strongest gusts at about 45 miles an hour. That's down from the 50 to 60 mile an hour gusts that were observed there last night before this front fell to pieces. And even the southwest coast this afternoon, seeing some pretty good breezy conditions with 30 to 40 mile an hour wind gusts. Tooksuk Bay, Cape Newnham, and those areas. Was this front pushed inland again, weakening, brought showers up to the Alaska Range. Some scattered showers occurring Kodiak Island and possibly southern coast of the Kenai Peninsula, but mostly back to the west here toward the Alaska Range, and then some isolated and scattered showers with cloudy skies back to the northwest there into the Seward Peninsula. Low clouds, fog, drizzle around the Bering Strait, Tin City on down into St. Lawrence Island. And then the isolated thunderstorms starting to pop up again mid-afternoon here in the northeast associated with this trough here, but a lot of sunshine and pretty warm conditions on down to the south. You can see the low clouds hanging on the north coast here and toward Elephant Cove, but clearing out nicely over the remainder of the area. And the forecast for tonight, that will continue here. Increase once again along the coast, push into the inside waters a certain extent with chance of drizzle anywhere along the outer coastline, back up toward maybe Yakutat. Otherwise, dry, light winds over the southeast, south central interior. The variable clouds, actually kind of partly to mostly cloudy actually. Here back to the west as clearing starts to diminish. And a weak system grazing the central Arctic coast with a chance of some moisture. And otherwise the north slope staying dry, isolated showers lingering in the eastern Brooks Range. And again, this front, actually another trough comes in, sort of re-energizes it a little bit. So rain along the southern coast of the Alaska Peninsula Aleutian Range, possibly up to western Kodiak Island. Northeast Bristol Bay, maybe more likely the north coast there from Dillingham over to Togiak. Better chance of rain than, say, King Salmon. But some of that could slip on up into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Areas of light rain or showers back along the very weak portion of that front. Next system here pushing into the far western Aleutians tonight. Another band of rain with this trough here will push right up to the coast, really not moving all that fast. High pressure holding over the interior aloft, so that's slowing everything down. But there is good southwest flow, especially with this system here out to the west. It'll be driving these systems farther inland and more moisture with a little bit of rain than what we've seen for the last several days. Otherwise, another sunny, hot day, 70s to mid-80s over interior Alaska from the Copper River Basin right up to the Brooks Range. Back to the northwest, not too bad. And maybe a little cooler along the Arctic coast there with maybe a little bit more in the way of north-northeast flow, but it's dry. And southeast coast, same as what you saw today with the low clouds diminishing, temperatures back into the at least the 70s. And then for Wednesday, isolated thunderstorms along this trough. That's the original front we just saw. Kind of hits a split flow here with the upper ridge. This part taking off and is this right there. And the other part up to the Brooks Range for Wednesday afternoon. But increasing southwest flow across the Bering is carrying several surges of moisture in right to the Yukon Delta coast. One right there, another one exiting the Perbeloff, spreading in towards the Nunivak Island area, and the bigger storm out here with more widespread precipitation and stronger upper support, pushing rain into the western Bering and with a warm front to Adak and Atka. Otherwise, Kodiak may see a mostly sunny day. And for lows tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, 55 to 60, as we've seen for the northeast interior, all the way back to the the Norton Sound area, lower to mid-50s Bristol Bay, and 50s southern Alaska, 50s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow, again back to near 80 there for the southern southeast coast, mid-70s all the way up to Skagway, and 60s along the coast. Lower 80s Copper River Basin, 80 to 85 again central eastern interior, and maybe cooler up there on the north slope with 50s now along the Arctic coast, and 50 for St. Lawrence Island, 50s and 60s over the southwest, lower 50s in the Aleutians. Following morning, Wednesday morning, got lows near 60, 55 to 60 here from actually Kotzebue eastward into Fort Yukon with Fairbanks low 60 degrees, mid to upper 30s central eastern Arctic coast, near 50 out along the southwest coast, 40s in the Aleutians, and the highs back near 80 in the eastern interior.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
On to the first flying weather graphic here for Tuesday morning. Marginal VFR up to the southwest coast, Bristol Bay, actually inland here into the Kuskokwim Valley, mostly along the Kuskokwim Mountains there, and then IFR over the Kilbrook Auckland Mountain areas. Marginal up to St. Lawrence Island through the Bering Strait, IFR, eastern central Arctic coast, and from the Perbeloffs on southwest, big area IFR, Kodiak Island, IFR, southern Kenai, Alaska Peninsula, just about through the Barren Islands and up along the eastern slopes, western Alaska Range, IFR eastward to along the southeast coast. Afternoon improves here along the North Gulf Coast, becoming VFR, even Prince William Sound, and a little bit of improvement here on around the Alaska Range. Otherwise, marginal VFR here right up into roughly about Kenai, and then up the extreme eastern Susitna Valley, but mostly That'll be along the Alaska Range, and that's just areas of possible marginal VFR. Still have IFR there along the southeast coast. We're seeing VFR inland. IFR here, central Bering Sea, back to the west, marginal for the Aleutians. IFR, Point Barrow eastward over to Mackenzie Bay. And for Wednesday morning, that pattern about holds up there along the Arctic coast. Notice VFR along the western coast, southward there in across Kivalina, Kotzebue Sound, and northern Seward Peninsula, then back into the marginal from central Seward Peninsula down all the way across Bristol Bay. Big area IFR again in the Bering Sea with no change here. IFR southern Alaska Peninsula, more extensive now. You know, see southwest flow pushing that moisture northeastward. The marginal VFR now across the Kuskokwim Valley, across Cook Inlet here. IFR most of the Kenai Peninsula. IFR northern Susitna Valley, western Alaska Range, on southwest toward Togiak. IFR hugging the coastline, but VFR Copper River Basin right up to and west there in the interior. And for the afternoon, again, that southwest jet continues to push moisture inland, and you can see IFR now. That's right around the, say, McKinley area, possibly Healy. Marginal VFR, though, on the increase even in the Tanana Valley. But 40-mile country staying VFR as well as the Copper River Basin, Yukon Flats, but increasing marginal VFR along and south of the Brooks Range. North Slope VFR, no change on the Arctic coast. Lots of IFR here, Nunivak Island, Fox Islands, Pribilofs westward, and IFR still hugging the coastline. Looks like increasing now even in the afternoon, marginal VFR inland a little bit there, with IFR up to about Cordova or so. And passes Anatuvik and Adigan, both VFR, again tomorrow for at least another day. Lake Clark and Merrill, same pattern we've seen. Marginal VFR at times, possibly on the eastern approaches of both passes. Rainy though, VFR. Windy VFR. And Isabel, same forecast. Mentesta, another VFR day coming up, as well as for Tanita. Portage, marginal at start, becoming VFR probably in the late morning through the afternoon. And Chilcoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, still very warm air aloft. 10 to 12,000 feet here across all the interior and the Panhandle into the Gulf of Alaska, Northeast Pacific. A little cooler out here with upper level low, 8,000 feet, and then warming up considerably there down along the western Aleutians. And for icing, above about 8,000 feet, could be some isolated moderate rime icing in the shaded area here, but again, pretty, you got to get up there to 8,000 feet before you hit freezing, so really not that significant. And for the jet stream, upper level low associated with the somewhat lower freezing levels by comparison here. Got 70 knots coming around, skirting the eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, back up into the southwest interior here, and then ridging still basically through this area from northwest Canada up across the western Arctic coast. And this jet well to the south here with eventually this flow's going to become more southwesterly over the next couple of days, and that'll be driving moisture and weakening fronts inland. And for 9,000 feet for tomorrow, 25 to 35 knots south-southwesterlies here coming in across the southwest interior. 35 eastern Aleutians diminishing to 25 to 30 over the west. Lighter winds here with ridging over the eastern interior. Really light winds, kind of a weak low at this center, at this elevation, centered there around Port Alexander. But 3,000 feet northwest, 10 to 20. Not as strong as it has been over the southern Panhandle. Pretty light over the interior Arctic coast, 25 to 35 on the east side. And turbulence-wise, occasional moderate chop, Alaska Peninsula and Yukon Delta coast, Nunivak Island to St. Lawrence Island.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms, why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. You know, there are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas, we have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, you know, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. We'll be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to today's sea ice analysis. Not a lot of change, still ice thinning out, melting up here to the north of the heavier ice that's right through this area here. And winds that have been southerly are expected to turn easterly, so this heavier ice might start pushing back down toward Point Barrow possibly. But that's going to be fighting a south-southwest current there. So general trend is really just continuing to slowly thin and melt without much movement to the main ice edge. And for coastal water forecast, small craft advisories again tomorrow here along much of the southeast outer coastline, west 20 on the north coast, south 15 Lynn Canal, northwest 15 for the central southern inside channels, and then light and variable winds here for the inside water areas of the Panhandle for Wednesday with 2-foot seas, south 15 northern Lynn Canal. No change out here along the outer coastline. And moving on to Prince William Sound, southwest 15, seas 2 feet, west-southwest winds 20 knots for the North Gulf Coast of those seas running at about 5 to 6 feet. Southerlies at 20 with 5-foot seas for the Barren Islands, southeast 20 Kamishak Bay, southwest at 10 with 2-foot seas, or 1 to 2-foot seas for Cook Inlet. And for Wednesday, south-southwest 15 to 20 here for the inlet with 4 to 5-foot seas with 20-knot winds south of the Forelands. West 20 for Kamishak Bay, southwest 20 Barren Islands, all the way up along the North Gulf Coast, falling back to 15 here on the east side. Seas not bad, staying 5 to 6 feet. Light southerlies in Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, south to southeast winds 20 knots, seas 3 feet in Shelikof Strait to 8 feet here on the Pacific side. South winds 25 knots, Sitkinak to Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, southerlies at 20. North side though, south 30 knots with 8-foot seas, southeast 15 for Bristol Bay. So those become southerly, but hold the same speed there for Bristol Bay. And we've got south-southwest 20 knots here for the Alaska Peninsula, 6 to 7-foot seas, and 15-knot winds on up to Sitkinak. Southwest 20 for the waters around Kodiak. And for the western Aleutian, small craft advisory, southerly winds, 25 knots, 6 to 7-foot seas. Central Aleutians, 20-25 from the southwest, seas not bad, 7 to 9 feet in the Pacific side. Small craft advisories mostly from the southwest here for the Fox Islands with the seas running 8 to 11 feet. Outlook for Wednesday, Southerlies 20 knots across Unalaska Island, Umnak Island, southwest 25, 6 to 7 foot seas, 25 to 30 around Adak and Atka with seas up to 9 feet. And then that next system, stronger system coming in, so we got minimum gales in the forecast with far western Aleutian, southwest 35, seas 13 feet. And for the southwest coast, swamp craft advisories, southeast 25 to 30 knots, 9 to 10 foot seas, east 25 for St. Matthew Island with 10 foot seas, southerlies at 20 for the Pribilof seas, 9 feet, St. Lawrence Island, east 25, lighter in Norton Sound. Southerly winds 20 knots for both Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, all the way down along the southwest coast, including the Pribilof, St. Matthew Island. Pretty uniform with the seas running 5 to 7 feet. And for the eastern Boulevard Sea coast, west-northwest at 20 tomorrow, diminishing to 10 knots on the central coast. Slight and variable become east from about Point Lay or so at 10. And then southerlies at 15 from Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson to the Bering Strait east at 15. And then for the Chukchi Sea on Wednesday, south 15 knots. And then from Cape Thompson up the west side, northeast at 20. Northeast of Point Lay really dropping off, becoming east at 10 for the central coast, and that extends all the way to Demarcation Point. And for the outlook again tonight, trough coming down after the sunny warm afternoon brings a chance of rain mainly to the central coast here of the Arctic, probably maybe some into the far eastern, maybe, and that's would be light, whatever gets in there, otherwise dry and light winds over interior Alaska, mild lows near 60 in some areas, and low clouds and fog on the increase, especially along the outer coastline, a chance of drizzle. This front continuing to slowly move in, kind of picks up a little more moisture from one of the troughs behind it. So rain, southwest Kodiak, northeast Bristol Bay, possibly in the southern Kuskokwim Valley, another batch of rain behind that, pushes to the coast tomorrow afternoon. This front moves inland and weakens with just areas of light rain or showers back northwest of the Alaska range with their southward into Kodiak, Shelikof Strait, a little bit heavier showers behind it. The next system pushing eastward. Fair and warm over the interior, mostly sunny. Again, temperatures 80 to 85. No change over the Panhandle, same pattern, but a little cooler on Wednesday. And surges of moisture keep it wet and cloudy out in the west.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.